They threw her out at 11 p.m. on a rainy November night. No warning, no explanation. Just two security guards dragging her through her own front door while her 7-year-old daughter screamed from the upstairs window. Claire Mitchell had been married for 10 years. She had given up her career as a corporate attorney. She had trusted her husband with everything, her money, her future, her entire identity. And in one night, he erased her completely. Her bank accounts, frozen. Her credit cards, canceled. Her phone, disconnected. Every lawyer in the city, already retained by her husband so none of them could represent her. But here's what Marcus Mitchell did not know. He did not know about the secret his own mother had been hiding for 30 years. He did not know about the woman he destroyed before Claire, the one whose son had been waiting his entire life for revenge. And he did not know that the mistress standing in Claire's bedroom, wearing Claire's robe, was about to become the key witness in his destruction. What happened next would freeze an entire courtroom into silence. Because the broken woman Marcus threw away like garbage, she was about to reveal a name that would tear his empire apart. And by the end of this story, you will understand why the most dangerous thing you can do to a woman is underestimate her. Lesson and value statement. Before we begin, I want you to know something important. This is not just a story about betrayal and revenge. This is a story about survival, about sisterhood, about what happens when a woman who has lost everything discovers she still has the one thing that matters most: herself. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever trusted the wrong person, if you have ever wondered whether you were strong enough to start over, this story is for you. Because the truth is, we do not rise alone. We rise together. And sometimes, the moment everything falls apart is the moment everything finally begins. Meaning of the story. This story carries a message that I hope stays with you long after the last word. Your worth is not determined by the person who failed to see it. Your strength is not measured by how much you can endure in silence, and your future is not written by the people who tried to erase you. Sometimes life strips away everything you thought you needed so you can finally discover everything you already have. The sisterhood is real, the comeback is possible, and broken women can become absolutely unbreakable. They did not ask Claire Mitchell to leave. They dragged her out like garbage while her 7-year-old daughter screamed from the upstairs window. And the woman standing in Claire's robe, drinking from Claire's favorite coffee mug, had the audacity to wave goodbye. The rain fell in sheets that November night, the kind of cold rain that seeps through fabric and settles into bones. Claire stood on the front porch of the home she had lived in for 10 years, her hands still shaking from being physically removed by two men in black suits she had never seen before. Private security. Her husband had hired private security to throw her out of her own house. Behind her, the door slammed with a finality that echoed down the empty street. Claire Mitchell was 42 years old. She had graduated summa cum laude from Columbia Law School. She had passed the bar exam on her first attempt with a score in the 98th percentile. She had been a rising associate at one of the most prestigious law firms in New York before she met Marcus Mitchell at a charity gala 12 years ago. He had been charming that night, more charming than any man she had ever met. He wore confidence like other men wore cologne, and when he looked at her across the crowded ballroom, she felt like the only woman in the world. He asked her to dance, and she said yes. He asked for her number, and she gave it without hesitation. He asked her to dinner, and she canceled plans she had made weeks in advance. That was her first mistake. She just did not know it yet. Their courtship was a whirlwind of expensive restaurants and surprise weekend trips and flowers delivered to her office so frequently that her colleagues started teasing her about having a secret admirer. Marcus was attentive, in ways that made her feel cherished. He remembered every detail she told him, every preference, every passing comment. When she mentioned once that she loved peonies, her apartment was filled with them the next day. When she said she had always wanted to see Paris, he booked flights for the following weekend. It felt like a fairy tale. It felt too good to be true. It was. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, he promised her partnership. He promised her safety. He promised she would never have to worry about anything again. And slowly, promise by promise, she had disappeared. First, it was her job. Marcus suggested she take a break, just a short one, to plan the wedding. The wedding planning took a year. By then, she had been away from the firm too long to return easily. Marcus said it did not matter. He made more than enough money for both of them. Why would she want to work herself to exhaustion when she did not have to? Then it was her friends. Marcus did not like Rachel's husband, said he was a bad influence. Marcus thought her college roommate was too negative, always complaining about something. Marcus wondered why she needed to see her sister so often when she had him. One by one, the people who had known Claire before Marcus faded from her life, replaced by Marcus's friends, Marcus's colleagues, Marcus's world. Then it was her voice. Her opinions were wrong. Her ideas were naive. Her feelings were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. After a while, Claire stopped sharing her opinions. She stopped having ideas. She stopped feeling anything at all except a vague gratitude that Marcus put up with her. She did not recognize the erosion while it was happening. That was the cruelest part. She thought she was happy. She thought she was lucky. She thought the tight feeling in her chest when Marcus corrected her in front of guests was just embarrassment at her own inadequacy. She thought the way he controlled their finances was protection. She thought the isolation was intimacy. She thought wrong. Now she stood in the rain, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a purse that contained her wallet, her phone, and a tube of lipstick she could not remember putting there. Everything else was inside. Her clothes, her jewelry, her photographs, her daughter, her daughter. Claire turned back toward the house and saw Emma's face pressed against the second-floor window. Even from this distance, she could see the tears streaming down her little girl's cheeks. Emma was pounding on the glass, her mouth forming words Claire could not hear but understood perfectly. "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." A figure appeared behind Emma. Jessica Wells, 31 years old, Marcus's executive assistant for the past 3 years. The woman Claire had welcomed into her home for dinner parties and holiday gatherings. The woman who had smiled at Claire while sleeping with her husband. Jessica's hand closed around Emma's shoulder and pulled her away from the window. The curtains fell closed. Claire's knees buckled. She caught herself on the porch railing, the metal cold and slick under her palms. For a long moment, she could not breathe. The rain soaked through her silk blouse, plastered her hair to her face, ran down her cheeks like the tears she was too shocked to cry. 3 hours earlier, her life had been normal. Painful, yes. Her mother had died just 3 days ago, and Claire was still raw with grief. Margaret Morrison had been 71 years old, a former cleaning woman who had worked her fingers to the bone to give Claire every opportunity she never had. She had been the one person who saw through Marcus from the beginning, who warned Claire that charm without kindness was just manipulation with better marketing. Claire had not listened. She wished now, more than anything, that she had listened. She had left Emma with Marcus to attend to final arrangements at the funeral home. She had signed papers. She had chosen flowers. She had done all the things a daughter does when her mother passes away. And then she had come home to find her husband in their bedroom with another woman. Not just any other woman, Jessica, wearing Claire's silk robe, the one Marcus had given her for their 5th anniversary. The one with her initials embroidered on the pocket. Marcus had not even looked surprised. He had simply reached into his nightstand drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. "Sign these," he had said. "Take $50,000 and disappear. The divorce is already filed. I am keeping the house, the accounts, and Emma. You will get nothing else." Claire had laughed. Actually laughed. Because surely this was some kind of sick joke. Surely her husband of 10 years was not standing in their bedroom with his mistress, handing her divorce papers while her mother's body was not yet cold. But Marcus had not been joking. When Claire refused to sign, when she demanded to speak with Emma, when she threatened to call the police, Marcus had simply nodded to someone behind her. And then hands had closed around her arms, and she was being dragged down the stairs, through the foyer, past the family portraits on the wall, out the front door, and into the rain. She had screamed. She had fought. She had clawed at the hands holding her, kicked at the legs, tried to bite the arms that would not let go. But the security guards were professionals, trained to subdue people without leaving marks, and Claire was a 130-pound woman who had not exercised in years. The last thing she heard before the door slammed was Emma screaming for her. Now Claire stood alone on the street where she had lived for a decade, and she had nowhere to go. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She fumbled for it with shaking hands, hoping it was someone who could help. It was a notification from her bank. "Your account has been frozen due to suspected fraudulent activity. Please contact customer service." Claire tried to open her banking app. It would not load. She tried another card. Declined. She tried to call customer service, but her phone made a strange clicking sound and the call would not connect. She tried again. Same result. She tried to send a text message to her sister. Failed to send. She tried to access her email. Network error. In the space of 3 hours, Claire Mitchell had lost her home, her daughter, her money, and her ability to communicate with the outside world. She had been erased. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, something she had said years ago when Claire announced her engagement. "Keep your own bank account," her mother had warned, "even if it only has $500. A woman without her own money is a woman without choices." Claire had smiled and told her mother she was being old-fashioned. Marcus would never do anything like that. Marcus loved her, standing in the rain, watching the lights of her former home go dark one by one. Claire realized she had made the most expensive mistake of her life. She had trusted the wrong man, and now she had nothing. The rain continued to fall. Claire stood there for what felt like hours, paralyzed by shock, unable to process what had just happened. A car drove by slowly, the driver staring at the soaking wet woman on the sidewalk. Claire turned away, shame burning through the numbness. She needed to move. She needed to think. She needed to do something other than stand here drowning in the rain, and her own disbelief. Her car. She still had her car. The keys were in her purse. Claire forced her legs to move, walking toward the driveway where her Range Rover sat gleaming under the security lights. She pressed the key fob. Nothing happened. She pressed it again. Still nothing. The car sat there, locked and silent, as dead to her as everything else in her life. Marcus had thought of everything. Claire looked up at the house one more time. The lights were all off now. Somewhere inside, Emma was probably crying herself to sleep, wondering why her mother had abandoned her. She had not abandoned her. She would never abandon her. But how could she explain that to a 7-year-old? How could she explain any of this? Claire turned and walked away from the home she had built, the life she had lived, the daughter she loved more than anything in the world. She walked down the empty street, with the rain soaking through her clothes. With no money, and no phone, and no idea where she was going. She just knew she could not stay here. And she knew, with a certainty that settled into her bones like the cold, that this was not over. This was just the beginning. The first night, Claire slept in her car, not her Range Rover, which was still sitting useless in the driveway of her former home. Her old car, a Honda Civic she had kept in a storage unit across town for reasons she could not quite articulate even to herself. Maybe some part of her had always known this day might come. Maybe some part of her had been preparing for escape without realizing it. The storage unit was paid for through an automatic withdrawal from an account Marcus did not know about. One of Claire's secrets, one of the few things she had managed to keep hidden during 10 years of marriage. The account had maybe $200 in it, remnants of birthday checks from her mother that Claire had deposited out of sentiment rather than necessity. Now that sentiment might save her life. She drove the Honda to a Walmart parking lot because she had read somewhere that the store allowed overnight parking. The rain had stopped by midnight, but the cold remained. Claire wrapped herself in a jacket she found in the back seat, one of Emma's old soccer jackets that smelled like grass and childhood, and she tried to sleep. She did not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emma's face at the window. She heard her daughter screaming. She felt the hands dragging her away. The images played on a loop, relentless, punishing her for failures she was only beginning to understand. At 3 a.m, she gave up trying to sleep and stared at the ceiling of her car instead. The Walmart parking lot was surprisingly busy for such a late hour. Cars came and went. A security guard drove by every 30 minutes, shining a flashlight at the vehicles parked in the far corners. Each time the light swept across Claire's windshield, her heart seized with fear. What if Marcus had reported the car stolen? What if the police came and arrested her? What if she ended up in jail while Emma was left with that woman, that snake who had smiled at Claire across dinner tables while planning to destroy her? The fear was irrational. The Honda was in Claire's name alone, purchased long before she met Marcus. But rationality had left the building hours ago. All Claire had now was fear and grief and a burning anger that she did not yet know how to use. By morning, Claire had a plan, or at least the skeleton of a plan. She would go to Rachel's house. Rachel Turner had been her best friend since their daughters started kindergarten together. They had survived potty training and playground politics and the exhausting logistics of suburban motherhood. Rachel had been there when Claire had her miscarriage 2 years ago, holding her hand in the hospital while Marcus was conveniently away on business. Rachel would help. Rachel would know what to do. Claire drove across town with the gas gauge hovering just above empty, her hands still shaking on the steering wheel. She had not eaten since lunch the day before. She had not showered. Her silk blouse was wrinkled and stained, her makeup smeared, her hair tangled. She looked, she realized with distant horror, exactly like the unstable woman Marcus would claim she was. But she could not think about that now. She needed help. She needed her friend. Rachel's house was a charming Tudor in a neighborhood nearly as expensive as Claire's former street. Claire had been here hundreds of times for book clubs and wine nights and lazy Sunday afternoons, watching their daughters play in the backyard. The house had always felt welcoming, warm, safe. Today, it felt like enemy territory. Rachel's husband, David, answered the door. He was a tall man, balding, with the kind of face that looked perpetually disappointed. Claire had never liked him much, but she had tolerated him for Rachel's sake. The way David looked at her now told her everything she needed to know. "Claire," he said. His voice was flat, cold. Nothing like the forced joviality he usually affected around her. "You should not be here." Claire blinked. "David, I need to talk to Rachel." "Is she home?" David did not move from the doorway. "Rachel does not want to see you. Marcus called last night. He explained everything. The words did not make sense." Claire shook her head. trying to clear the fog of exhaustion and shock. Explained what? David, I do not know what Marcus told you, but whatever it was, it is not true. He threw me out of my house. He took my daughter. I have nowhere to go. I just need to talk to Rachel for 5 minutes. David's expression hardened. He told us about your breakdown, about the threats you made. He said you have been struggling for months, that he tried to get you help, but you refused. He is worried about you, Claire. We all are, but you cannot be here. Rachel asked me to tell you that she thinks you need professional help. Claire's mouth opened. No sound came out. Behind David, she could see the hallway where she had stood 100 times. The kitchen where she and Rachel had drunk wine and laughed about their husbands. The living room where their daughters had played together. Where Emma and David's daughter Lily had built pillow forts and pretended to be princesses. All of it was closed to her now. David, she finally managed. I did not have a breakdown. I did not make any threats. Marcus is lying. He has been planning this for months. He had security guards drag me out of my own house. He froze all my accounts. He cut off my phone. I have nothing. Please, I just need to see Rachel. I just need 5 minutes. Something flickered in David's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or discomfort. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by the cold certainty of a man who had already made up his mind. I think you should leave now, Claire, before I call someone. The door closed in her face. Claire stood on the porch for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. Marcus had called her best friend in the middle of the night and told lies, and Rachel had believed him. Without question, without even calling Claire to hear her side. 10 years of friendship, erased with a single phone call. Claire walked back to her car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She sat behind the wheel and stared at Rachel's house, watching for any sign of movement, any indication that Rachel might change her mind and come outside. No one came. The next 24 hours brought more of the same, each rejection more devastating than the last. Claire tried her sister Karen, but Karen did not answer. She left 3 voicemails that went unreturned. She drove to Karen's apartment and buzzed the intercom for 10 minutes before a neighbor finally told her that Karen was not home, had left early that morning with a suitcase, destination unknown. Had Marcus gotten to her too? Had he convinced Claire's own sister that she was dangerous? Claire tried her cousin Michael, the one who always showed up at family gatherings with bad jokes and good bourbon. Michael's wife answered the door, looked at Claire with something like fear, and said, Michael was not available. When Claire asked if she could wait, the woman said she thought that would not be a good idea, and closed the door. Claire tried every lawyer in the phone book, all 27 of them. Each one told her the same thing. They had a conflict of interest. They could not take her case. When Claire asked what kind of conflict, they mumbled something about existing client relationships and hung up. By the 20th call, Claire understood what Marcus had done. He had retained every family lawyer in the city. Not to represent him, just to create conflicts of interest that would prevent them from representing her. It was brilliant, really. A preemptive strike against any legal defense she might mount. He had probably been planning it for months, maybe years. Every conversation, every argument, every moment of vulnerability had been cataloged and weaponized, and she had never seen it coming. By the second night, Claire was running out of options and running out of hope. She parked her Honda in a different Walmart parking lot, this one on the other side of town, and tried to figure out her next move. Her phone still was not working properly, but she had managed to connect to the Walmart Wi-Fi long enough to check her email. That was when she saw the worst of it. Marcus had sent messages to everyone they knew. Colleagues, neighbors, parents from Emma's school. The emails were masterfully crafted, full of concern and regret. He wrote about Claire's mental health struggles, her recent breakdown, her increasingly erratic behavior. He wrote about how much he loved her, how hard he had tried to help her, how devastated he was that it had come to this. He wrote about finding her standing over Emma's bed at 2 in the morning, muttering to herself. He wrote about the time she threw a glass at his head during an argument. He wrote about the medication she refused to take, the therapy appointments she skipped, the darkness that had consumed her since her mother's death. None of it was true, but Marcus had receipts. Screenshots of text messages that Claire did not remember sending. Photos of broken dishes that Claire did not remember breaking. Medical records showing prescriptions for anxiety medication that Claire had taken briefly after her miscarriage, twisted to look like evidence of chronic instability. He had been building this case for years. Every interaction, every moment had been documented and distorted, and now he was presenting that fabricated evidence to everyone Claire knew, turning her entire social network against her before she even had a chance to defend herself. By morning, Claire's situation had become clear. She had no money, she had no phone, she had no friends, she had no family willing to speak with her, she had no lawyer willing to represent her. She had nothing except a 12-year-old Honda with a quarter tank of gas and the clothes on her back. And somewhere across town, her 7-year-old daughter was waking up in a house full of strangers, wondering why her mother had abandoned her. Claire sat in her car as the sun rose over the Walmart parking lot, and she considered her options. She could give up. Sign the papers Marcus wanted her to sign, take the $50,000 and disappear, start over somewhere new, try to build a life from the ashes of everything she had lost. But that would mean leaving Emma. That would mean letting Marcus win. That would mean proving right everyone who believed she was weak, unstable, unworthy of her own child. Claire thought about her mother. Margaret Morrison had cleaned houses for 40 years, scrubbing toilets and washing windows for wealthy families who treated her like furniture. She had saved every penny she could spare, denied herself every luxury, sacrificed endlessly so that Claire could go to college, could go to law school, could have a better life, and Claire had thrown it all away. She had given up her career, she had given up her independence, she had given up everything her mother had worked so hard to give her, all for a man who never loved her at all. She could not change the past, but she could still change the future. Claire started the car and drove toward the courthouse. She did not know what she would do when she got there. She did not know if anyone would listen to her, but she knew she had to try, because somewhere out there, her daughter was waiting. And Claire Mitchell was not going to let her down. The courthouse was not helpful. That was putting it mildly. Claire arrived at 9 in the morning, wearing the same wrinkled clothes she had worn for 2 days, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman at the end of her rope. The clerk at the family court window looked at her with barely concealed pity. Claire explained her situation as calmly as she could. Her husband had thrown her out. He had taken her daughter. He had frozen her accounts and turned everyone she knew against her. She needed to file for emergency custody. The clerk typed something into her computer. Then her expression changed. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "this address you've given is invalid, and I'm showing that a protective order has already been filed in this matter." Claire's heart stopped. A protective order? The clerk turned her computer screen so Claire could see. "Yes, ma'am. Filed by Marcus Mitchell 3 days ago. Against you. It says here you made threats against your husband and child and are considered a danger to yourself and others." "That is not true," Claire whispered. "I never threatened anyone. I would never hurt my daughter. My husband is the one who—" "Ma'am?" the clerk interrupted. I cannot adjudicate the truth of these claims. I can only tell you what is in the system. There is an active protective order against you. You are prohibited from approaching your husband, your marital residence, or your minor child until this matter is resolved by the court. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Claire's feet. He filed a protective order. Before he even threw me out, he planned this entire thing. The clerk's expression softened slightly. Ma'am, I am not supposed to say this, but you need a lawyer. A good one. What you are describing sounds like a coordinated campaign of abuse and manipulation. The court has seen cases like this before, but without legal representation, you are going to have a very difficult time. Every lawyer in this city has a conflict of interest, Claire said. My husband made sure of that. The clerk was quiet for a moment. Then she slid a business card across the counter. There is a women's shelter on Oak Street, she said quietly. Haven House. They have legal aid services. Off the record, if your husband is doing what you say he is doing, they have seen it before. They might be able to help. Claire took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you. She drove to Haven House with the last of her gas and the last of her hope. The building was nondescript, a converted Victorian home with security cameras mounted above the doors and bars on the first-floor windows. It looked more like a fortress than a shelter designed to keep the outside world at bay. Claire sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes, staring at the entrance. This was not supposed to be her life. She was a Columbia Law graduate. She had been a rising star at Sullivan and Cromwell. She had married a successful man and built what she thought was a beautiful life. And now she was sitting outside a homeless shelter, wondering if they would take her in. Pride. That was what kept her in the car. Pride and shame, and the desperate hope that somehow, some way, this would all turn out to be a misunderstanding, that Marcus would realize he had made a mistake, that her friends would call and apologize, that everything would go back to normal. But there was no normal anymore. There was only this. Claire got out of the car and walked to the door. She pressed the buzzer and waited. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker. Can I help you? Claire opened her mouth to speak, but what came out was not words. It was a sound she did not recognize, something between a sob and a scream, all the fear and grief and rage of the past 3 days finally breaking through the walls she had built around them. She collapsed against the door and she wept. 30 seconds later, the door opened, and arms wrapped around her. Strong arms. Safe arms. A voice in her ear said, I got you, honey. You are safe now. Whatever happened, you are safe. Claire looked up into the face of a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, a woman who looked at her not with pity, but with recognition. My name is Dolores, the woman said, but everyone calls me Dee. Welcome to Haven House. The next few hours passed in a blur of intake forms and medical screenings, and cups of tea that Claire drank without tasting. Haven House was bigger than it looked from outside, with room for 30 women and their children. There were dormitory-style sleeping quarters, a communal kitchen, a playroom for kids, and a small office where Dee conducted business. Dee Washington was 58 years old, a former family court judge who had seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes. She had presided over hundreds of custody cases, watching wealthy men game the system while their wives and children paid the price. 20 years ago, she had lost her own custody battle, her ex-husband using his money and connections to take her children despite clear evidence of his abuse. That loss had broken something in Dee, but it had also forged something new. She had left the bench, cashed out her retirement, and opened Haven House, a place where women could find shelter, not just from abusive partners, but from the system that often failed them. Tell me everything, Dee said, once Claire was settled in her small room. From the beginning, do not leave anything out. Claire talked for 3 hours. She told Dee about meeting Marcus, about falling in love with him, about leaving her career because he insisted she did not need to work. She told her about the subtle ways he had isolated her over the years, cutting her off from friends who asked too many questions, dismissing her opinions until she stopped having them, making her feel grateful for every scrap of attention he threw her way. She told Dee about finding him with Jessica, about the divorce papers, about being thrown out, about discovering that Marcus had systematically destroyed her ability to fight back. When Claire finished, Dee was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and squeezed Claire's hand. "Honey," Dee said, "I have seen this playbook before. Your husband did not just cheat on you. He planned your destruction like a military campaign. The timing with your mother's death, the isolation campaign, the financial warfare. This was not impulsive. This was strategic." Claire nodded slowly. "I know. I just cannot understand why. Why go to all this trouble? He has money. He has power. He could have just divorced me normally." Dee's expression hardened. "Because men like your husband do not want a divorce. They want a victory. They want to win so completely that you never recover. They want to prove to themselves and to everyone watching that they were right to discard you, that you were never worth keeping in the first place." "But Emma," Claire whispered, "she is his daughter too. How can he use her like this?" To men like Marcus, children are not people. They are property. They are weapons. They are proof of victory. Winning means taking everything, including the child, especially the child. That night, Claire could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed in the shared dormitory, listening to the sounds of other women breathing, crying, whispering prayers into the darkness. These women had stories like hers, some worse, some much worse, and yet they were all here, in this same place, fighting the same battle. She was not alone. The realization should have been comforting. Instead, it made her angry. How many women were out there right now, trapped in marriages like hers? How many were being gaslit and isolated and financially abused, convinced that they were the problem, that they deserved what was happening to them? How many would never make it to a place like Haven House at all? Claire stared at the ceiling and made herself a promise. She was not just going to survive this. She was going to fight back. She was going to expose Marcus for what he really was, and she was going to get her daughter back. She just had to figure out how. The next morning, Claire met the women who would help her do exactly that. Margot Sullivan was 35, with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She had been a forensic accountant at a major firm before her own husband put her in the hospital with a broken jaw and 3 cracked ribs. She was hiding from him at Haven House while the police searched for him across 3 states. Claire was sitting in the common room, trying to figure out how to access her email on a borrowed laptop, when Margot sat down beside her. "You are Marcus Mitchell's wife," Margot said. It was not a question. Claire looked up, startled. "How did you know?" Margot shrugged. "I used to audit companies like his. Tech startups with aggressive growth strategies and accounting that did not quite add up. His name came across my desk more than once." "What do you mean, did not add up?" Margot glanced around to make sure they were alone. "I mean that men like your husband do not just hide affairs. They hide money, and hiding money always leaves a trail." Claire leaned forward. "What kind of trail?" "The kind that tells you where the bodies are buried." Margot smiled slightly. "Metaphorically speaking." Before Claire could respond, another woman appeared with 2 cups of coffee. This was Pastor Linda Brooks, 60 years old, a shelter volunteer who ran a small church across town. She had a face like a grandmother and a tongue like a sailor, though she always apologized to God afterward. Linda looked at Claire's ruined designer shoes, still mud-stained from that first night in the rain. "Honey," she said, "those are $800 Louboutins in a homeless shelter. That is like bringing a Ferrari to a demolition derby." She handed Claire a pair of worn sneakers. "Welcome to rock bottom." "The coffee is terrible, but the company understands." Despite everything, Claire laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in nearly a week. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. These three women, strangers a week ago, became Claire's army. Dee helped her navigate the legal system, pulling strings with former colleagues to find information about Claire's case. Margot started digging into Marcus's finances, using skills she had honed over a decade of forensic accounting. Pastor Linda provided moral support, bad coffee, and surprisingly practical advice about surviving rock bottom. These women had no obligation to help Claire. They had their own problems, their own battles, their own trauma, and yet they showed up for her, day after day, because that was what women did for each other when the world tried to tear them apart. "Document everything," Margot told her one afternoon. "Screenshots, recordings if they are legal in your state, texts, emails. The court does not care about your feelings. The court cares about evidence. Without evidence, you are just another hysterical woman making accusations against a successful man." Claire nodded, writing it down. "And keep your own bank account," Dee added. "When this is over, when you get back on your feet, you make sure you always have money that belongs to you alone. A woman without her own money is a woman without choices. I learned that the hard way." "My mother used to say that," Claire said quietly. Dee smiled. "Smart woman, your mother." Claire's eyes filled with tears. She really was. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Claire made a decision. She was not going to be a victim anymore. She was not going to wait for Marcus to destroy her completely. She was going to fight back. And with these women beside her, she might actually have a chance. 3 weeks after Claire Mitchell was thrown out of her home, she finally got her day in court. Sort of. The hearing was not a trial. It was not even a full custody hearing. It was a preliminary review, a chance for both sides to present their positions and for the judge to make temporary rulings about custody and visitation. But for Claire, it felt like everything. It was the first time anyone in a position of authority would hear her side of the story. She had found a lawyer, barely. Tommy Reeves was 29 years old, fresh out of law school, working as a public defender, because no private firm would hire him. He had a nervous habit of adjusting his glasses and a tendency to speak too quickly when he was anxious. He wore suits that did not quite fit and ties that were always slightly crooked. He was absolutely terrified of going up against Marcus Mitchell's legal team, but he was also the only lawyer in the city willing to take Claire's case. "Every other firm has a conflict," Tommy had explained when they first met in Dee's office at Haven House. "Your husband retained them all. Every family lawyer, every divorce attorney, everyone who might conceivably represent you in this matter. It is actually impressive, in a terrifying sort of way." "Can he do that?" Claire asked. Tommy shrugged. "There is nothing technically illegal about hiring multiple lawyers. He just has to pay them a retainer and sign an engagement letter. The conflicts of interest do the rest." It is a brilliant strategy if your goal is to leave your wife completely defenseless. "So why are you willing to help me?" Tommy smiled slightly. "Because I do not work for a private firm. I work for people who cannot afford private firms. And that, Mrs. Mitchell, is now you. Plus," he added, adjusting his glasses, "I really do not like bullies." The courtroom was cold and sterile. All beige walls and fluorescent lights. Claire had dressed as carefully as she could, borrowing a simple navy dress from the shelter's donation closet. She had washed her hair. She had applied makeup for the first time in weeks. She wanted to look stable, normal, like the kind of woman who deserved to have her daughter. Marcus sat at the opposite table with three lawyers in expensive suits, their faces carefully neutral. They looked like sharks in Italian wool, circling a wounded seal. Jessica was not there, thankfully, but her presence hung over the proceedings like a ghost. Claire had prepared her testimony for days. She had documented everything, just like Margot told her. She had screenshots of Marcus's emails to her friends, the ones where he claimed she was mentally unstable. She had bank records showing the frozen accounts. She had a timeline of his systematic isolation campaign. What she did not have was her daughter. The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 60s named Martha Collins, reviewed the paperwork with visible impatience. She had clearly seen 100 cases like this, 100 couples tearing each other apart over money and children and wounded pride. "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge said, "you are claiming that your husband fabricated the protective order against you?" "Yes, Your Honor. I never made any threats. I never displayed any violent or erratic behavior. The entire basis for that order is a fabrication designed to separate me from my daughter." Marcus's lead attorney stood smoothly. He was tall and silver-haired, with the kind of presence that came from decades of winning cases exactly like this one. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation of Mrs. Mitchell's erratic behavior over the past several months. Medical records showing treatment for anxiety and depression, witness statements from concerned friends and family members, text messages demonstrating increasingly unstable communication patterns." Claire's heart sank. She had taken anxiety medication briefly after a miscarriage 2 years ago. Marcus had insisted on it, had made the appointment himself, had picked up the prescription. At the time, she had thought he was being supportive. Now she understood he had been building a case against her, documenting her vulnerability for future use. Tommy stood up, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Your Honor, anxiety medication is not evidence of instability. Approximately 20% of American adults take some form of psychiatric medication, and those witness statements are from people Mr. Mitchell contacted directly after the separation. They are not independent observations. They are the result of a coordinated campaign to poison my client's reputation." The judge held up a hand. "I am not here to determine the truth of these claims today. I am here to determine temporary custody arrangements while this matter is investigated. Both parties will have an opportunity to present full evidence at a later hearing." She reviewed the paperwork again, her brow furrowing. "Ms. Mitchell, do you have stable housing?" Claire hesitated. She had prepared for this question, but the answer still felt like a confession of failure. "I am currently staying at Haven House. It is a women's shelter for survivors of domestic abuse." Marcus's attorney pounced. "Your Honor, Mrs. Mitchell is homeless. She has no income, no assets, no ability to provide for a child. Mr. Mitchell, by contrast, has a stable home, substantial resources, and has been the child's primary caretaker during this difficult transition period." "That is not true," Claire said, her voice rising despite herself. "I was Emma's primary caretaker for 7 years. I was the one who woke up with her every night when she was a baby. I was the one who took her to school and helped with her homework and sat with her when she was sick. Marcus was never home. He was always working, always traveling, always—" "Mrs. Mitchell," the judge's voice was sharp, "you will have your turn to speak. Please allow counsel to finish." Claire forced herself to sit back. Her hands clenched beneath the table. The arguments went back and forth for another hour. Tommy did his best, but he was outmatched, and they both knew it. Marcus's lawyers were seasoned professionals with unlimited resources and decades of experience. Tommy was a kid with a law degree and a stubborn streak. He fought hard, but it was like watching a lightweight boxer take on a heavyweight champion. In the end, the judge made her ruling. Given the current circumstances, temporary custody will remain with Mr. Mitchell, who has demonstrated stable housing and financial resources. However, she continued, raising a hand to stop Marcus's attorney from celebrating prematurely, I am concerned about the allegations Mrs. Mitchell has made. Therefore, I am granting Mrs. Mitchell supervised visitation twice weekly, pending further investigation into the protective order claims. Claire's breath caught. Visitation. She would get to see Emma. Tommy squeezed her arm under the table. That is good news, he whispered. It is not everything, but it is a start. The judge is taking your claims seriously. Across the room, Marcus showed no reaction. His lawyers began packing up, already discussing their next moves. But just for a moment, Marcus looked at Claire, and she saw something in his eyes. Not anger, not triumph, something worse, amusement. He was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching her fight for scraps, while he controlled everything that mattered. To him, this was not a custody battle. It was entertainment. Claire filed that look away for later. Someday, she promised herself, she would make him regret it. The first supervised visit took place 4 days later. The visitation center was a gray building in a gray part of town, staffed by tired social workers who had seen too much suffering. Claire arrived 30 minutes early, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had brought books for Emma, picture books about brave girls who went on adventures and saved themselves. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, led Claire to a small room with worn furniture and cheerful posters on the walls. Everything about the space was designed to be non-threatening, child-friendly, institutional in the way that suggested this was a place where bad things had happened and might happen again. Patricia sat in the corner with a clipboard, ready to document everything. Every word Claire said, every expression on her face, every interaction with her daughter. Claire sat on the couch and waited. When Emma walked through the door, Claire nearly collapsed. Her daughter looked smaller somehow, thinner. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed as though she had been crying for days. She was wearing clothes Claire did not recognize, expensive designer items that were probably Jessica's choices. A pink dress that was too formal for a 7-year-old, patent leather shoes that looked uncomfortable. But when Emma saw her mother, all of that fell away. "Mommy!" Emma ran across the room and threw herself into Claire's arms. Claire held her so tightly she was afraid she might break her, but she could not let go. Would not let go. This was her daughter, her baby, the person she loved more than anyone else in the world. "I knew you would come back," Emma whispered against Claire's shoulder. "I knew it. Daddy said you were sick and could not see me anymore, but I knew it was not true. I knew you would come back." Tears streamed down Claire's face. "I will always come back for you, baby. Always. No matter what." For 90 minutes, they sat together on the worn couch, while Patricia watched and took notes. They talked about school, about Emma's friends, about the books Claire had brought, about everything except Marcus and Jessica, and the nightmare that had become their lives. Claire was careful. She did not ask about Marcus. She did not say anything negative about him. She did not cry, except for those first few moments of reunion. She played the role of stable, loving mother perfectly, because she knew that every word, every gesture, was being documented and would be used to judge her fitness as a parent. It was exhausting. It was degrading. It was necessary. When the visit ended, Emma clung to her. "I do not want to go back," she said, her small voice cracking. "I want to stay with you." "Can I stay with you, Mommy? Please?" Claire's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to grab her daughter and run, to disappear into some new life where Marcus could never find them. But she knew that was exactly what Marcus was hoping she would do. Any attempt to flee would prove his accusations true, would give him everything he needed to take Emma away forever. I know, baby, Claire said, forcing her voice to stay steady. I know. But I am working on it, okay? I am working really hard to make that happen. I need you to be brave for just a little longer. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I can be brave. That is my girl. Claire kissed her daughter's forehead. I love you more than anything in the world. Never forget that. I love you too, Mommy. Patricia stepped forward, her face professionally neutral. Time is up, Mrs. Mitchell. Claire released her daughter and watched Emma walk away. At the door, Emma turned back one more time, her small face filled with a trust that Claire was terrified of betraying. Promise you will come back? Emma asked. Claire nodded. I promise. She watched until Emma disappeared around the corner. Then she went to the bathroom and sobbed until she had nothing left. That night, back at Haven House, Claire allowed herself to feel something like hope. It was not much. It was not enough. But it was a start. She had seen her daughter. She had held her. She had promised to bring her home. And Claire Mitchell was going to keep that promise if it was the last thing she ever did. 2 weeks after Claire's first supervised visit with Emma, everything she had built was destroyed. The day started like any other. Claire woke early at Haven House, ate breakfast with Margot and the other residents, and reviewed the case file with Tommy over the phone. They were making progress, slow progress, but progress. Tommy had filed a motion to dismiss the protective order based on lack of evidence. The hearing was scheduled for next week. Claire even allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to hold Emma again without someone watching, to take her daughter to the park, to tuck her in at night, to rebuild the life that Marcus had stolen. She should have known better. At 9 in the morning, Claire arrived at the visitation center for her twice-weekly appointment with Emma. She was carrying a new book, a story about a girl who builds a rocket ship and flies to the moon. Emma loved stories about girls who did impossible things. But when Claire walked through the security doors, something was wrong. Patricia, the social worker, was waiting in the lobby. Her face was different today, harder. There was no warmth in her eyes, only professional distance and something that looked like pity. Mrs. Mitchell, Patricia said, there has been a development. Perhaps we should sit down. Claire's stomach dropped. Where is Emma? Is she okay? Your daughter is fine, physically, but I am afraid your visit today has been canceled. Canceled? Why? Patricia hesitated. She glanced around the lobby as if checking for witnesses. Then she pulled a document from her clipboard and handed it to Claire. Your husband filed an emergency motion this morning. He has presented evidence that you made threats to kidnap Emma and flee the country. Claire stared at the paper in her hands. The words blurred and swam, refusing to make sense. What? That is insane. I never said anything like that. I would never. According to this document, Patricia continued, her voice carefully neutral, there is an audio recording of you saying, and I quote, I am going to take Emma and disappear. He will never find us. The ground tilted beneath Claire's feet. No. She shook her head violently. No, that is not what I said. I would never. She stopped. Because suddenly, horribly, she remembered, 3 weeks ago, the day after her second visit with Emma, she had been on the phone with Margot, crying about how hopeless everything felt. Margot had been trying to comfort her, suggesting wild plans to help her escape, and Claire had said, I would never take Emma and disappear. That would destroy her. She needs stability. She needs her school and her friends. I cannot just rip her away from everything she knows. I would never take Emma and disappear. Marcus had recorded that conversation. Somehow, he had access to her phone calls. And he had edited the recording, cutting out the words that changed everything. I would never became. I am going to. Claire looked at Patricia with desperate eyes. The recording is edited. I was saying I would never do that. He cut out half the sentence. You have to listen to the whole thing. Patricia's expression did not change. That will have to be determined by the court, Mrs. Mitchell. In the meantime, the judge has issued an emergency order. All visitation is suspended pending investigation. No. Claire grabbed the woman's arm. Please, you do not understand. He is manipulating the system. He is using my own words against me. I am not a threat to my daughter. I am her mother. I love her more than anything. Patricia gently removed Claire's hand from her arm. I understand you are upset, Mrs. Mitchell, but there is nothing I can do. The order comes from the court. If you have evidence that the recording was manipulated, you will need to present it at the hearing. When is the hearing? Patricia consulted her clipboard. It has been scheduled for 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks? That is the earliest available date. Family court is backed up. I am sorry. Claire stood in the lobby of the visitation center, the paper trembling in her hands, and felt the last of her hope drain away. 6 weeks. 6 weeks without seeing her daughter. 6 weeks for Marcus to poison Emma against her. 6 weeks for his lies to become Emma's truth. The door behind Patricia opened, and Claire saw movement. A flash of pink, patent leather shoes. A small face turned toward her, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Emma. Behind her daughter stood Jessica Wells, one hand on Emma's shoulder, like a claim of ownership. And beside Jessica stood Marcus's lawyer, the silver-haired shark, wearing an expression of pure satisfaction. Jessica saw Claire looking and smiled. It was a cruel smile, triumphant, the smile of a woman who had won. She bent down and whispered something in Emma's ear. Emma's face crumpled. She looked at Claire one more time, her eyes filling with tears. Then Jessica turned her around and led her away, through a different door, away from the mother who could not reach her. The last thing Claire heard was Jessica's voice, bright and cheerful, saying, "Come on, sweetheart. Let us go get ice cream." Claire stood frozen until they disappeared, until the door closed, until she was alone in the lobby with a piece of paper that had just destroyed her life. Then she walked to her car and drove back to Haven House in a state of shock, so profound she barely registered the road. She did not remember parking. She did not remember walking through the doors. She only remembered Dee finding her in the bathroom at 3 in the morning, sitting in the shower with cold water running over her, fully clothed, staring at nothing. "Claire," Dee said, kneeling beside her. "Honey, look at me." Claire looked. Her eyes were empty. Her body was shaking with cold, but she did not seem to notice. "I cannot feel my hands," she whispered. "I cannot feel anything." Dee turned off the water and wrapped a blanket around Claire's shoulders. "That is shock. It will pass. I lost her, Dee. I lost my daughter. He won. He took everything from me, and now he is going to take her mind, too. He is going to make her believe I abandoned her. He is going to turn her into someone who does not remember what it felt like to be loved by me." Dee did not say anything. She just held Claire while she cried, while the cold water dripped from her hair and the night stretched on forever. For the next 3 days, Claire did not leave her room. Margot brought food that Claire did not eat. Pastor Linda brought tea that Claire did not drink. Dee sat with her in silence, not asking anything, not expecting anything, just being there. On the 4th day, there was a knock at Claire's door. It was Margot. Her face was different somehow. Pale, but her eyes were bright, alert. There was something in her expression that Claire had not seen before. "Hope, Claire," Margot said. "I found something. You need to come see this right now." Claire did not move. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like the laundry detergent Haven House used. She had not showered since that night in the bathroom. She had not eaten in 2 days. Claire. Margot stepped into the room and grabbed her arm. I mean it. Right now. This is important. Something in Margot's voice cut through the fog. Not the urgency, not the hope. Something else. Something that sounded almost like anger. Righteous anger. Claire let herself be pulled to her feet, let herself be led down the hall to Dee's office, where papers were spread across every surface and a laptop sat open on the desk. I have been digging into your husband's finances, Margot said. Not his company, his personal accounts, the ones he thinks no one can find. Claire stared at the papers without comprehension. What did you find? Margot's jaw tightened. She pulled out a chair and sat Claire down in front of the laptop. Your mother died 3 weeks ago. Did she leave you anything? Claire frowned. The question seemed random, disconnected from everything that mattered. I do not know. I never had a chance to deal with her estate. Marcus threw me out the day after the funeral. I have not thought about it since. Margot leaned forward, her eyes intense. That is because Marcus was already dealing with it. What do you mean? Margot turned the laptop toward Claire. On the screen was a bank statement from an account Claire had never seen before. The Whitmore Trust, her mother's maiden name. Claire's breath caught. What is this? Your mother left you $2.3 million in a trust that Marcus had himself appointed trustee of using forged documents. He has been draining that trust for 8 years. The current balance is $47,000. Claire's mind could not process the words. My mother had $2 million? She saved it for 50 years. Margot's voice was thick with emotion. She cleaned houses until her hands bled. She never bought herself anything nice. She lived in that tiny apartment and took the bus everywhere and ate store-brand everything. And she left every single penny to you, her daughter, the only family she had, and Marcus stole it. Margot's hands clenched into fists on the desk. Used it to fund his company. His entire empire, Claire. Every investor he impressed. Every deal he closed. Every success he celebrated. It was all built on money he stole from your mother. Claire sat very still. Her mind was racing, making connections she should have made years ago. Marcus's startup had struggled in the early days. She remembered him complaining about cash flow problems, about investors who did not believe in his vision. Then suddenly, 3 years into their marriage, everything had changed. Suddenly there was money. Suddenly there were investors. Suddenly Marcus Mitchell was a rising star in the tech world. 3 years into their marriage, right around the time her mother had supposedly updated her estate planning. He knew, Claire whispered. He knew about the money before he even married me. Margot nodded grimly. I think so. I think he targeted you specifically because of your mother's savings. He probably did some kind of background check, found out about the trust, and planned the whole thing from the beginning. Everything. Everything had been a lie. The charming courtship, the romantic proposal, the promises of partnership and safety. All of it had been a con. A long, elaborate, devastating con designed to steal her mother's life savings. Claire looked at Margot. How do we prove this? Margot smiled, and there was something fierce in it. Something dangerous. Bank records, she said. Wire transfers. Signature comparisons. The court does not care about feelings, remember? But it cares about evidence. And honey, we just found a mountain of it. The discovery of Marcus's financial crimes changed everything. Suddenly, Claire was not just a discarded wife fighting for custody. She was a victim of fraud, a victim of theft, a victim of a years-long conspiracy that had stolen her inheritance and destroyed her family. It was not just ammunition for the custody case. It was grounds for criminal charges. Margot worked through the nights, fueled by coffee and righteous anger, tracing wire transfers and documenting forgeries. She built a timeline showing exactly how Marcus had gained control of the Whitmore Trust, forged signature cards, fabricated board resolutions, letters supposedly from Claire's mother that contained phrases Margaret Morrison would never have used. The forgeries were good, but they were not good enough to fool a forensic accountant who knew what she was looking for. Dee pulled strings with former colleagues, judges and lawyers she had known during her years on the bench. She got access to court records that should have taken months to obtain. She called in favors she had been saving for decades, and Pastor Linda made a discovery of her own. I run a small tax preparation service for low-income families, Linda explained one morning over breakfast. Mostly undocumented folks who need help but are afraid of official channels. I have been doing it for 20 years. You would be amazed what people tell their tax preparer. Claire looked up from her untouched oatmeal. What does that have to do with my case? Linda smiled. One of my clients is a woman named Rosa Hernandez. She used to work as a housekeeper for your husband. Claire sat up straighter. Rosa? I remember her. She was with the family for years. Then suddenly she was gone. Marcus said she quit to take care of a sick relative. Linda's smile turned sharp. Rosa did not quit. She was fired because she saw things she was not supposed to see, and she has been waiting for years for someone to listen. Rosa came to Haven House that afternoon. She was a small woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and nervous hands. She had been cleaning houses since she was 16 years old, first in Mexico, then in the United States. She had worked for Marcus and Claire for 5 years, long enough to become invisible the way all domestic workers eventually become invisible to the families they serve. But invisible did not mean blind. Mr. Mitchell, he thought I could not read, Rosa said in accented English. He thought because I was the cleaning lady, I was stupid, but I can read. I read very well, and I see things. Things he thought no one was watching. She pulled a shoebox from her bag and set it on the table. Inside were dozens of photographs, documents, bank statements, letters, things Marcus had thrown in the trash, thinking they were destroyed forever. I take pictures on my phone, Rosa explained, just in case. My mother always said, Rosa, in this country, the only protection is evidence. So, I take pictures. Every time I see something that does not look right. Claire picked up one photograph with trembling hands. It was an image of a bank statement from the Whitmore Trust. Her mother's name was at the top, but the signature at the bottom was wrong. That is not my mother's signature, Claire whispered. No. Margot leaned over her shoulder, studying the image. And it is not yours either. It is a forgery, a pretty good one, but still a forgery. Look at the way the R curves at the bottom. Your mother's R's were much more angular. I have samples of her handwriting from other documents. This is definitely not her. Rosa had more. Photographs of documents showing wire transfers to shell companies Marcus controlled. Photographs of letters from Marcus's lawyers discussing how to quietly take control of the trust without alerting Claire. Photographs of everything Marcus thought he had hidden. Why did you keep these? Claire asked Rosa. Rosa's expression hardened. Because men like him think they can do anything. They think no one is watching. They think the cleaning lady is furniture, but someone is always watching, Mrs. Mitchell. Someone always sees. And someday, I knew, someone would need to know the truth. Claire reached across the table and took Rosa's hand. Thank you. I do not know how I can ever repay you for this. Rosa squeezed her hand in return. You do not have to repay me. Just make him pay for what he did. For you. For your mother. For everyone he has hurt. That night, Dee called in the biggest favor of her career. She had been a family court judge for 15 years before she burned out and started Haven House. She still had contacts in the system, people who remembered her, people who owed her. One of those people was a forensic audio analyst named James, who worked for the state crime lab. James owed Dee because she had given his daughter shelter when his daughter's boyfriend nearly killed her. She had helped James's daughter get back on her feet, get a job, start over. Now Dee was calling in that debt. "The recording your husband submitted," Dee said to Claire. "The one where you supposedly threatened to kidnap Emma. James ran it through his equipment. And it has been edited. Not just cut and spliced like with scissors and tape. Digitally manipulated. The words were taken from different parts of the conversation and stitched together using software that is actually pretty sophisticated. Your husband hired a professional." Claire felt a surge of vindication. Can James prove it in court? He already wrote a report. Dee slid a document across the table. But that is not all. He found something else. What? The original recording was backed up to a cloud server. Your husband must have uploaded it before the editing and then forgot to delete the original. James has the complete file. In the original, you say exactly what you told us. I would never take Emma and disappear. The words "I would never" are clearly audible. Claire closed her eyes. Relief washed over her in waves so powerful she felt dizzy. But Dee was not finished. "There is something else you need to know," she said quietly. "Something I found in the court records from 15 years ago." 15 years ago? What could possibly... Your husband was married before you. His first wife was a woman named Andrea Holloway. They had a son together. Claire stared at her. Marcus was married before? He never told me. He said I was his first wife. He said he had been waiting his whole life to find someone like me. Dee's expression was grim. He lied. Andrea and Marcus were married for 4 years. They divorced when their son Michael was 5 years old. What happened? Andrea had what the court records describe as a mental breakdown during the divorce. She voluntarily surrendered custody of her son. She was diagnosed with severe mental illness and hospitalized multiple times. Claire felt cold. He did the same thing to her, the same playbook, the same strategy. Yes, but that is not the worst part. What could be worse than that? Dee's eyes were filled with something that looked like grief. Andrea Holloway died by suicide 5 years ago. She never recovered from losing her son. She spent the rest of her life believing she was crazy, believing she had failed as a mother, believing she deserved everything that happened to her. The room was silent. Claire could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the blood pounding in her temples. Marcus did not just destroy her marriage, Dee continued. He destroyed her mind. He gaslit her so thoroughly that she could not trust her own perceptions anymore. By the time he was done with her, she did not know what was real. Just like he is trying to do to me. Exactly like he is trying to do to you. But Claire, there is one more thing. One piece of good news in all of this darkness. What? Dee slid a piece of paper across the table. A name and a phone number. Andrea's son, Michael, is 22 years old now. He lives on the other side of town. And when I reached out to him yesterday, when I told him what was happening to you, he said he has been waiting his entire life for someone to help him expose his father. Michael wants to testify. Michael wants to burn Marcus Mitchell to the ground. And he has evidence of his own. Years of documentation about what his father did to his mother. He is willing to share all of it. Claire looked at the phone number. This changed everything. This was not just a custody battle anymore. This was a pattern of behavior. This was proof that Marcus had done this before, and patterns of behavior were exactly what judges looked for when determining custody. Make the call, Dee said. Michael is expecting you. Claire picked up the phone. Michael Holloway looked nothing like Marcus Mitchell. Where Marcus was dark and polished, all sharp edges and careful control, Michael was fair and rough around the edges. He had his mother's coloring, Dee had said, though Claire had never seen Andrea's face. His eyes were haunted in a way that suggested he had seen too much, too young, and never quite recovered. They met at a diner across town, a greasy spoon kind of place with cracked vinyl booths, and a waitress who called everyone honey. It was the kind of place Marcus would never be caught dead in, which was exactly why Michael had chosen it. Claire sat across from him, Margot beside her for support, while Michael told his story. "I was 7 when my father took me from my mother," Michael said. His voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of someone who had told this story so many times the pain had worn smooth. "Same age as your daughter is now." Claire's chest tightened. "What do you remember?" "Everything." Michael's hands wrapped around his coffee cup, knuckles white. "I remember my mother crying when they took me away. I remember her reaching for me and the social worker holding her back. I remember my father telling me she was sick, that she could not take care of me anymore, that it was not safe for me to see her. But it was not true." Michael laughed bitterly. "It was not even close to true. My mother was the most stable person I ever knew. Before my father decided to destroy her, he looked at Claire with eyes much older than 22. You want to know what I figured out years later? You want to know the playbook? Yes. First, he isolates you, cuts you off from your friends, your family, anyone who might notice what he is doing, makes you dependent on him for everything." Claire nodded. She knew this part intimately. "Then he starts documenting everything you say, everything you do. He twists it. He builds a case. A text message where you are upset becomes evidence of emotional instability. A glass of wine at dinner becomes a drinking problem. A bad day becomes a pattern of depression. And the anxiety medication," Michael nodded. "Exactly. Any help you seek becomes evidence against you. Therapist appointments become proof you need professional help. Medication becomes proof you cannot function without drugs. He weaponizes your own wellness against you. How did he do it with your mother?" The breakdown? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think he drugged her." Claire stared at him. "I cannot prove it," Michael continued. "I have never been able to prove it, but in the last months of their marriage, my mother started experiencing things that did not make sense. Memory blackouts, paranoia, episodes where she could not remember what she had done or said. It was like watching someone lose their grip on reality in real time." That is when he filed for divorce. He filed for divorce while she was in the middle of what looked like a psychotic break. He had medical experts testify about her condition. He had witness statements from people who had seen her behaving erratically. By the time the judge made the ruling, everyone was convinced my mother was a danger to herself and others. Did you believe it? I was 7 years old. Michael's voice cracked slightly. I believed everything my father told me. He said my mother was sick. He said she could not take care of me. He said I was better off with him and his new wife. His new wife? Jessica Wells. Claire felt the blood drain from her face. Jessica? Jessica was married to your father for 6 years. Michael's smile was cold. She was his executive assistant before she was his wife. Sound familiar? Oh my God. When I was 13, Jessica left my father. I never knew why. She just disappeared one day. My father told me she had been transferred for work, but I knew that was a lie. I figured she had just had enough of him and wanted out. Now Claire understood something she had not understood before. Jessica was not just Marcus's mistress. She was not just a homewrecker who had destroyed Claire's marriage. Jessica was a survivor, someone who had been through the Marcus Mitchell machine and come out the other side. That did not make Claire like her. but it made her understand. "What happened to your mother after the divorce?" Claire asked. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. "She never recovered. She spent years trying to prove she was not crazy, trying to get custody of me back. But by then, everyone had written her off. The courts, her family, even me. You believed your father. I believed my father." Michael's voice was thick with self-loathing. "I was a kid. I believed what I was told, and by the time I was old enough to question it, my mother was already dead." Silence fell over the table. The waitress came by and refilled their coffees. Outside, life went on, indifferent to the tragedy being recounted in this greasy diner booth. "I reconnected with her 2 years before she died," Michael finally said. "I was 18. I tracked her down on my own, without my father knowing, and she told me everything. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the way my father had systematically destroyed her sanity to take me away. Did you believe her? Not at first. I had been raised to think she was unstable, but the more time I spent with her, the more I realized she was not crazy at all. She was traumatized. She was broken, but she was not crazy. And then she died." Michael nodded. "She killed herself 6 months after I found her. She said she was tired. She said she had spent 20 years fighting a battle she could never win. She said the only thing that had kept her going was the hope of reconnecting with me, and now that she had, she could finally rest." Claire reached across the table and took his hand. "I am so sorry." Michael squeezed her hand briefly, then pulled away. "Do not be sorry. Be angry, because my father is doing the same thing to you that he did to her. And if we do not stop him, your daughter is going to grow up the same way I did, believing her mother abandoned her, believing her mother was crazy. That is not going to happen. No." Michael's eyes were hard. "It is not. Because this time, my father is not going to win." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick folder. "These are my mother's journals," he said. "Everything she documented during the marriage and the divorce. I found them after she died. And these are letters she wrote to me that my father intercepted and hid. He did not want me to know she was trying to reach me." Claire took the folder with reverent hands. "This is incredible. There is more." Michael pulled out another item. A flash drive. "When I was 16, I started recording my conversations with my father. I did not know why at the time. I just felt like I needed to. Some of those recordings are very incriminating." "Incriminating how?" Michael smiled grimly. "There is one where he talks about my mother, about what he did to her. He was drunk. He thought I was asleep. He was on the phone with someone. I never found out who. And he said, and I quote, 'She was too easy. By the end, she did not know what was real anymore. All it took was patience. Wear them down long enough, and they break themselves.'" Claire felt sick. He said that? He said that. And it is on tape. The drive back to Haven House was quiet. Claire sat in the passenger seat while Margot drove, the folder of evidence heavy in her lap. "We have him," Margot said finally. "We have everything we need to destroy him." Claire nodded slowly. "But it is not enough." "What do you mean?" "I mean we have evidence of what he did to Andrea. We have evidence of financial fraud. We have proof that the recording was edited. But we still do not have a witness to what he is doing right now. To me. To Emma." Margot glanced at her. "What are you thinking?" "I am thinking about Jessica Wells." "The mistress? The survivor," Claire corrected. "Michael said she was married to Marcus for 6 years. She knows how he operates. She knows his playbook inside and out. But she is the enemy. She helped him destroy you." Claire shook her head. "She is a piece on the board, just like I was, just like Andrea was. Marcus uses women. He manipulates them. He discards them when they are no longer useful." You think Jessica is going to be discarded. I think Jessica is smart enough to know she will be discarded, and I think when she realizes that, she might be willing to talk. Margot was quiet for a moment. That is a dangerous game, I know, but it might be the only game left to play. The week before the final hearing should have been triumphant. Claire had evidence. She had allies. She had a plan. Michael was prepared to testify about his father's pattern of behavior. Margot had assembled a complete forensic analysis of the financial fraud. James had his report proving the recording was manipulated. Everything was in place. Everything was ready. Then the disasters began. The first blow came on Monday night. Tommy Reeves called Claire at 11 p.m., his voice strange and hollow. "Claire," he said, "I do not know how to tell you this. Just tell me. I have been offered a job, a real job, at Henderson and Associates." Claire's heart stopped. Henderson and Associates was one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. They represented some of Marcus's biggest investors. "Tommy, no." His voice was anguished. "I cannot turn it down, Claire. I have $200,000 in student loans. I have been living in a studio apartment eating ramen for 3 years. This job pays 6 figures. It changes everything for me. They bought you." Claire's voice was flat. "Marcus bought you." A long pause. Then quietly, "I am required to drop your case immediately and sign an NDA about everything I know. The offer is contingent on both. I am sorry, Claire. I really am. I wanted to help you. I believed in your case. You believed in it so much, you sold it to the highest bidder. That is not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Tommy." The line went dead. Claire sat in the darkness of a room at Haven House and tried to process what had just happened. Her lawyer, the one person in the legal system who had been willing to fight for her, had been bought off. 5 days before the hearing, she would have to find new representation. In 5 days. Against Marcus Mitchell's army of attorneys. It was impossible. It was hopeless. It was exactly what Marcus had planned. The second blow came on Wednesday morning. Claire was eating breakfast in the Haven House kitchen, trying to figure out what to do next. When the front door burst open, police officers flooded into the building, guns drawn, shouting commands that blurred together into chaos. "Everyone down, on the ground, hands where we can see them." The residents screamed and scattered. Some hit the floor. Some ran for the back exits. Claire stood frozen, too shocked to move. "Claire Mitchell," one of the officers shouted. "Claire Mitchell, you are under arrest." They surrounded her. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenched them behind her back, snapped handcuffs around her wrists. "What is happening?" Claire demanded. "What am I being charged with? Theft, fraud, embezzlement." The officer's voice was cold. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is insane. I have not stolen anything. My husband is the one who—" "Ma'am, I said you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." They led Claire through the shelter in handcuffs, past the women she had lived with for weeks, past Dee and Margot and Pastor Linda, who were all shouting protests that no one listened to. Outside, news vans were already gathering. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Someone had tipped them off. Someone had made sure Claire Mitchell's arrest would be broadcast across the city. Marcus had called the media. The mugshot was on the evening news by 6 p.m. The headline read, "Wife of Tech CEO arrested for fraud. Claims of forgery and embezzlement." The story painted Claire as a bitter ex-wife who had fabricated evidence to use against her innocent husband. Everything she had uncovered about Marcus, the bank records, the wire transfers, the forged signatures, was now being presented as proof of her own crimes. Marcus was claiming she had forged the documents herself, that she had created fake evidence to frame him. that she was a dangerous, disturbed woman who would stop at nothing to destroy the man who had rightfully divorced her. Bail was set at $100,000. Claire had $47 to her name. The third blow came on Thursday. From the county jail, through a borrowed phone call to Dee, Claire learned three things. First, Marcus had sat Emma down and explained that her mother was a criminal, that she had stolen money and hurt people and was going to prison for a very long time, that Emma should forget about her, that Emma had a new family now. Second, Jessica Wells had filed paperwork to formally adopt Emma. The hearing was scheduled for next month. Marcus's lawyers were arguing that given Claire's incarceration, there was no reason to delay. Third, and worst of all, Marcus had filed a motion to terminate Claire's parental rights entirely. Given her arrest, his lawyers argued, she was clearly an unfit mother, a danger to herself and others. Someone who should never be allowed near children again. Claire sat in her cell and stared at the ceiling. For 3 hours, she considered giving up, really giving up. Not just the case, everything. What was the point? Marcus had unlimited resources. He had the media, he had the courts, he had everyone and everything, and she had nothing. She had less than nothing. She was in jail, charged with crimes she did not commit, while her daughter was being told that her mother was a monster. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she was broken. Maybe she had been broken all along, and this was just the inevitable end of a story that had been written before she was even born. Some people win, some people lose, and Claire Mitchell had always been a loser, pretending she was something more. She thought about Andrea Holloway, about the woman who had spent 20 years fighting a battle she could never win, about the mother who had given up, finally, exhausted by the impossibility of it all. Claire understood now. She understood the appeal of surrender, the seductive promise of peace. But then she thought about Emma, about her daughter's face at that first visit, bright with hope, about Emma's voice saying, "Promise you will come back?" And Claire realized she could not give up. Not because she was strong, not because she was brave, but because Emma was counting on her, because somewhere out there, a 7-year-old girl was waiting for her mother to keep her promise. Claire had never broken a promise to her daughter. She was not going to start now. At 2 a.m, the guard came to her cell. "Mitchell, someone posted your bail." Claire blinked. "That is impossible. I do not have anyone who could—" "Well, someone did. You are free to go." She walked through the jail's processing center in a daze, collecting her belongings, signing papers she did not read. Who could have posted her bail? The only people who cared about her were at Haven House, and none of them had $100,000. When she finally stepped through the exit doors into the cold night air, she stopped dead. A woman was waiting for her, silver-haired, elegant, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Claire's car. She looked like money, old money, the kind of money that did not need to prove anything. Claire did not recognize her at first. Then she did. Catherine Mitchell, Marcus's mother. Claire could not move, could not speak. Catherine walked toward her slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete. "I know what my son is," she said. Her voice was tired, resigned, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. "I have known for 30 years. I just kept hoping he would change. Why are you here?" "Because I watched him destroy Andrea. I watched the same playbook, the same cruelty, the same systematic dismantling of a woman's sanity, and I did nothing. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself there must be another side to the story. I told myself all the lies mothers tell themselves when their children do monstrous things." She took a step closer, and then I watched him do it to you. The same pattern, the same destruction, and I realized that if I did not stop him this time, he would keep doing it. To you, to the next woman, to my granddaughter, someday, when she grew up and tried to have a life of her own. Catherine handed Claire an envelope. Inside was a flash drive and a thick stack of papers. "These are my journals," Catherine said. 30 years of documentation. Every lie I witnessed, every manipulation I pretended not to see, every time I watched my son destroy someone and looked the other way. Claire looked at the flash drive. "What is on this?" "Everything I could copy from his personal computer. Bank records, emails, correspondence with his lawyers, things he thought no one would ever find. I have been his mother for 48 years. He never thought to protect himself from me. Why now? Why are you doing this now?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Because Michael called me. My other grandson, Andrea's boy. He told me what really happened to his mother. Not the story Marcus told me, the truth. And I realized that I had spent 30 years believing my son's lies while innocent women paid the price." She took Claire's hands in hers. "I cannot undo what Marcus has done. I cannot bring Andrea back. I cannot give you back the years you lost. But I can help you stop him from doing it again. I can help you save your daughter." Claire looked at this woman, this stranger who had given birth to the man who had destroyed her life, and she saw something she recognized. A mother, trying finally to do the right thing. "Thank you," Claire whispered. Catherine squeezed her hands. "Do not thank me yet. Thank me when this is over. Thank me when you are holding your daughter again." The final hearing took place on a gray December morning, exactly 3 months after Claire Mitchell was thrown out of her home. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the back wall, their operators jostling for position. Reporters clutched notebooks and digital recorders. Spectators filled every seat, drawn by the scandal that had dominated local headlines for weeks. The case had become a sensation. Tech CEO accused of fraud, wife arrested, then released, allegations and counter-allegations flying in every direction. It was the kind of drama that sold newspapers and drove clicks. The kind of story everyone had an opinion about. Claire sat at the plaintiff's table, trying to ignore the eyes on her back. Beside her sat her new lawyer, a woman named Victoria Shaw, who had materialized like an answer to prayer. Victoria was 60 years old, silver-haired and steel-spined, a legend in family law, who had retired 5 years ago after a career spent fighting exactly these kinds of cases. Dee had called her as a last resort, explaining the situation in desperate detail. Victoria had listened in silence. Then she had said, "I will be there in an hour." She had arrived at Haven House that same night, already reviewing the evidence, already planning strategy. When Claire asked why she was willing to take the case, Victoria had smiled grimly. "Because I have spent my entire career watching men like your husband game the system," she said. "I am retired now. I have no more patience for diplomacy. I would do this case for free." Across the aisle, Marcus Mitchell sat with his team of lawyers. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an expression of calm confidence. He looked like a man who had already won. Jessica Wells sat beside him, playing the role of supportive partner. Her hand rested on Marcus's arm in a gesture that looked rehearsed, performative. Claire noticed that Jessica did not look at her. Not once. The judge entered. Not Judge Collins, who had presided over the earlier hearings. This was Judge Patricia Holloway, a no-nonsense woman in her 70s who was known throughout the legal community for one thing. She despised wealthy men who thought they could buy justice. Dee had pulled every string she had to get this judge assigned to the case. It had taken favors accumulated over decades. It had taken risks that could have ended Dee's reputation in the legal community forever. But it had worked. "Let us begin," Judge Holloway said. The first hour was procedural. Motions were filed. Objections were raised. Lawyers spoke in the formal language of the court, dancing around the ugliness at the heart of the case. Then Victoria Shaw stood up. "Your Honor," she said, "we would like to present evidence that the criminal charges against my client were filed fraudulently as part of a systematic campaign of abuse and manipulation by her husband." Marcus's lead attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. This is a custody hearing, not a criminal trial." "Your Honor," Victoria continued smoothly, "the criminal charges are directly relevant to the custody question. If we can demonstrate that those charges were fabricated, it destroys the foundation of Mr. Mitchell's petition to terminate parental rights." Judge Holloway considered this for a moment. Then she nodded. "I will allow it." "Proceed," Victoria began. She presented the bank records showing Marcus's theft from Claire's trust. Documents tracing the movement of over $2 million from the Whitmore Trust into Marcus's personal accounts. She presented the forensic audio analysis proving the kidnapping recording had been manipulated, with side-by-side comparisons of the edited and original versions. She presented Rose's photographs of forged documents, along with expert handwriting analysis, confirming the signatures were not authentic. She presented Catherine Mitchell's journals, 30 years of documentation of her son's behavior entered into evidence by Marcus's own mother. With each piece of evidence, Marcus's confident expression cracked a little more. His lawyers whispered frantically among themselves. His hands, once relaxed on the table, clenched into fists. Then Victoria called Michael Holloway to the stand. Michael walked to the witness box with the careful posture of someone who had been waiting his whole life for this moment. He was wearing a simple suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes clear and focused. "Can you state your relationship to the defendant?" Victoria asked. "Marcus Mitchell is my biological father." A murmur went through the courtroom. Marcus's face went pale. "And can you tell the court about your mother?" Michael nodded. "My mother was Andrea Holloway. She was married to Marcus Mitchell for 4 years. They divorced when I was 5 years old." "What happened during that divorce?" Michael's voice was steady. "My mother had what was described as a mental breakdown. She was hospitalized multiple times. She eventually surrendered custody of me to my father." "And did you believe, at the time, that your mother was mentally ill?" "Yes, I believed everything my father told me. I was a child. I had no reason to doubt him." "What changed your mind?" "I reconnected with my mother when I was 18 years old. I spent 2 years getting to know her before she passed away. And during that time, I came to understand that she was not mentally ill. She was a victim of the same tactics that are being used against Mrs. Mitchell today." Marcus's attorney stood. "Objection. The witness is speculating about matters he cannot possibly—" "Your Honor," Victoria interrupted, "the witness has first-hand knowledge of his father's behavior patterns. He is testifying about his own observations and experiences." "Overruled," Judge Holloway said. "Continue." Michael looked directly at Marcus for the first time. "My father is a predator," he said. His voice did not waver. "He targets women. He isolates them. He controls them financially and emotionally. And when they try to leave, he destroys them. He did it to my mother. He is doing it to Mrs. Mitchell. And if this court does not stop him, he will do it again." The courtroom was utterly silent. "Your witness," Victoria said to Marcus's attorney. The attorney stood slowly. He looked rattled, uncertain. After a moment, he said, "No questions at this time." Michael stepped down from the witness box. As he passed Marcus, he paused. "Mom says hello," he said quietly, then he walked back to his seat. But Victoria was not finished. "Your Honor," she said, "we have one more piece of evidence. Recordings made by Jessica Wells during her relationship with Mr. Mitchell." Jessica's head snapped up. For a moment, terror flashed across her face. Then something else replaced it. Something that looked like resignation. Or relief. Jessica stood. "I would like to submit these recordings to the court," she said. Her voice was steady, though her hands were shaking. "They contain admissions by Mr. Mitchell of financial fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy to falsely accuse his wife of crimes she did not commit." Marcus grabbed her arm. "What the hell are you doing?" Jessica pulled away. "Something I should have done months ago. Something I should have done years ago, when I was married to you myself." The courtroom erupted. Reporters started typing frantically. Spectators whispered to each other. Marcus's lawyers called for a recess. But Judge Holloway simply held up her hand, and silence fell. "The recordings will be admitted," she said. "Continue." For the next hour, the courtroom listened to Marcus Mitchell's own voice, recording after recording, captured without his knowledge, each one more damning than the last. Him admitting to stealing from Claire's trust. That money was just sitting there. Her mother was too stupid to manage it properly. "I did Claire a favor." Him describing how he manipulated the recording. "Modern technology is amazing. You can make anyone say anything. She thinks she is so smart, but I am always 3 steps ahead." Him laughing about Andrea. She was too easy. By the end, she did not know what was real anymore. All it took was patience. Wear them down long enough, and they break themselves. When the last recording finished, the courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Holloway removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Mr. Mitchell," she said finally, "do you have anything to say?" Marcus stood. His composure was gone, his face was red, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Those recordings are faked. My ex-wife has manipulated everyone in this room. She is unstable. She is a liar. She is—" "Mr. Mitchell," the judge's voice cut through his tirade like a knife. "I have been a judge for 35 years. I have seen hundreds of cases. I have seen guilty men and innocent men. I have seen liars and truth-tellers, and I have developed, over those 35 years, a very reliable sense for when someone is trying to manipulate my court." She leaned forward. "The evidence presented today is overwhelming. Bank records, audio analysis, eyewitness testimony, documentation spanning decades, and your own voice, Mr. Mitchell, recorded admitting to crimes that would make any decent person sick." Marcus opened his mouth to speak. "I am not finished," the judge said. "You have spent your career believing that your money and your confidence make you untouchable. You have destroyed women, stolen fortunes, and lied to courts without consequence. But today, that ends." She turned to Claire. "Mrs. Mitchell, please rise." Claire stood on legs that felt like they might give way at any moment. "Based on the evidence presented," Judge Holloway said, "I am ruling as follows." The courtroom held its breath. "Full custody of the minor child, Emma Mitchell, is hereby granted to Claire Mitchell, effective immediately. All criminal charges against Mrs. Mitchell are to be referred to the district attorney with a recommendation for immediate dismissal and investigation of malicious prosecution. An investigation into Marcus Mitchell for fraud, forgery, perjury, and related crimes will be referred to the appropriate authorities." Claire could not breathe. Additionally, the judge continued, "The Whitmore Trust is to be restored to Mrs. Mitchell's sole control, with damages to be determined at a subsequent hearing. Mr. Mitchell's parental rights are suspended pending criminal investigation, with supervised visitation to be evaluated after resolution of the criminal matters." She looked at Marcus. "Mr. Mitchell, you built your empire by destroying women. Today, you face the consequences. And I hope, for your sake, that you spend your time reflecting on the lives you have ruined." She picked up her gavel. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell, and Claire Mitchell, for the first time in 3 months, allowed herself to believe it might actually be over. The drive to pick up Emma was the longest of Claire's life. Victoria had arranged everything. The transfer of custody would happen at a neutral location, a family services office across town. Emma would be brought by a social worker, not by Marcus, who was already dealing with police officers who had arrived at his home with a warrant. Claire sat in the back of Dee's car, clutching the custody order in her hands, reading and rereading the words that had given her daughter back. Full custody, effective immediately. Margot was driving. Dee was in the passenger seat. Pastor Linda was in the back beside Claire, holding her hand and praying under her breath, in a way that was both annoying and oddly comforting. "What if she is angry at me?" Claire whispered. "What if Marcus convinced her that I abandoned her? What if she does not want to come with me?" Dee turned around in her seat. "Claire, that little girl has been waiting for you every single day. Children know. They always know. Whatever lies Marcus told her, she knows the truth in her heart." "But what if—" "No more what ifs," Dee said firmly. "You have fought too hard and come too far to doubt yourself now. You are that girl's mother. She loves you, and you are about to get her back." The Family Services office was a bland government building, all beige walls and fluorescent lights. Claire walked through the front doors on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The social worker was waiting in the lobby. She smiled when she saw Claire. "Mrs. Mitchell, Emma is in the playroom. She has been asking about you all morning." She led Claire down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, past offices and conference rooms and water coolers, past the ordinary machinery of bureaucracy that had, against all odds, finally worked in her favor. The playroom door was open. Claire could see toys scattered across the floor, children's drawings on the walls, small chairs around the small table, and there, in the middle of it all, was Emma. Her daughter was sitting on the floor, building something with blocks. She was wearing different clothes than the last time Claire had seen her. Simpler clothes, jeans and a t-shirt instead of that ridiculous pink dress Jessica had dressed her in. She looked up when Claire appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Claire was frozen, terrified that this was a dream, that she would wake up back in her cell or back in her car in that Walmart parking lot, alone and hopeless. Then Emma's face transformed. The uncertainty disappeared, replaced by a joy so pure it made Claire's heart ache. "Mommy!" Emma launched herself across the room and into Claire's arms. Claire caught her and held her so tightly she was afraid she might never let go. "You came back," Emma was saying, over and over, her voice muffled against Claire's shoulder. You came back, you promised, and you came back. I will always come back for you," Claire whispered. "I will always, always come back for you." They stayed like that for a long time. The social worker waited patiently. Dee and Margot and Pastor Linda watched from the doorway, all of them crying. Finally, Emma pulled back and looked at her mother with serious 7-year-old eyes. "Mommy, are we going home now?" Claire smiled through her tears. "Yes, baby, we are going home. Home." Not the mansion where Claire had lived for 10 years. That place had never really been home. It had been a prison dressed up in expensive furniture and the illusion of happiness. Home now was a modest 2-bedroom apartment that Dee had helped Claire find. It was small, the kitchen was cramped, the bedroom barely fit a queen-sized bed. But it was theirs. The first night in the apartment, Claire made dinner while Emma explored every corner of their new home. Macaroni and cheese from a box, because that was what Emma requested, and Claire had decided she was done, saying no to the small things that brought her daughter joy. They ate at the tiny kitchen table, while evening light streamed through the windows. Emma talked about everything and nothing, the way children do when they feel safe. School, her friends. A book she was reading about a girl who lived in a boxcar. She did not mention Marcus. She did not mention Jessica. Claire did not ask. There would be time for hard conversations later. Time to help Emma process what had happened, to find a good therapist, to build new routines and new trust. But tonight was for macaroni and cheese and laughter and the simple miracle of being together again. Later, after Emma was in bed, Claire stood at the window and watched the city lights flicker in the darkness. So much had changed. So much had been lost. She would never get back the years she had wasted on Marcus. She would never get back her mother's trust, most of which had been spent on a company that was now in shambles. She would never get back the innocence she had once believed in, the naive faith that love would protect her from harm. But she had gained something too, something precious. She had gained herself. Claire thought about the woman she had been 3 months ago, the woman who could not remember her own social security number, the woman who believed her worth was measured by her husband's approval, the woman who had given away her career, her independence, her voice. That woman was gone. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had been broken completely and had rebuilt herself from the ground up. She had not done it alone. She had done it with Dee and Margot and Pastor Linda and Catherine and Michael and Victoria and all the other women and allies who had shown up for her when everyone else had walked away. That was the lesson, Claire realized. That was what Marcus had never understood. He thought destroying her support system would destroy her. He thought isolation would make her weak, but he was wrong. Because when the people who were supposed to love her failed her, Claire had found new people. Strangers who became family. Women who had been through their own battles and understood, in a way no one else could, exactly what it meant to survive. The sisterhood. That was what Dee called it. The invisible network of women who held each other up when the world tried to knock them down. Claire had never really understood it before. She had always thought she was strong enough to stand on her own. But now she knew that real strength was not about standing alone. Real strength was about knowing when to ask for help and being willing to accept it when it came. There was a knock at the door. Claire opened it to find Dee, Margot, and Pastor Linda standing in the hallway. Margot was holding a bottle of wine. Dee was carrying a casserole dish. Linda was holding a gift wrapped in newspaper. "We come bearing gifts," Linda announced. "And by gifts, I mean food, alcohol, and this extremely ugly thing I made." Claire laughed and stepped back to let them in. They gathered in the small living room, sitting on second-hand furniture that had been donated by Haven House. Margot poured the wine. Dee served the casserole, which turned out to be surprisingly good. Linda presented her gift with exaggerated ceremony. It was a cross-stitch sampler, framed and ready to hang. The stitches were uneven, the letters slightly crooked. It read, "Trust in God, but keep your own bank account." "I made it myself," Linda said proudly. Dee examined it critically. "This looks like it was made by someone who has never held a needle in their life." I said I made it. I did not say I made it well. Claire hung it on the wall beside the kitchen. It looked terrible. It was perfect. "To Claire," Dee said, raising her glass, "who fought like hell and won. To the sisterhood," Margot added, "who made sure she did not have to fight alone. To the future," Linda finished, "which is looking pretty damn bright from where I'm standing." They clinked glasses and drank. Later, after the wine was gone and the casserole was finished, after Dee and Margot and Linda had hugged Claire goodbye and promised to come back next week, Claire checked on Emma one more time. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around a stuffed bear that Claire had bought at a thrift store. Her face was relaxed, untroubled. She looked like a child who felt safe. Claire leaned down and kissed her forehead. "We are okay now," she whispered. "We are going to be okay." She walked back to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus Mitchell was being processed into a jail cell. His assets were frozen. His company was in ruins. His reputation was destroyed. Claire felt nothing when she thought about him. Not anger, not triumph, not even satisfaction. She just felt free. The story did not end with revenge. It ended with something far more powerful. A woman who had been broken and had rebuilt herself. A daughter who would grow up knowing what strength looked like. A sisterhood that proved women could save each other when the world tried to tear them apart. And somewhere in a jail cell, Marcus Mitchell was learning something Claire had always known. The most dangerous thing you can do to a woman is underestimate her, because when she rises, she does not rise alone. She brings everyone with her. 1 year later, Claire stood at the podium of a conference room in downtown Haven House. The building had expanded. Where there had once been room for 30 women, there was now room for 60. A legal aid clinic occupied the first floor, staffed by volunteer lawyers who had been inspired by Claire's case. A job training center filled the basement. A children's daycare took up the entire third floor. All of it had been funded by the settlement from Marcus's criminal case. The courts had awarded Claire full restitution of her mother's trust, plus damages. It was more money than Claire had ever imagined having, and she had used every penny to help other women. Margaret Morrison would have approved. Claire looked out at the audience gathered for Haven House's 1-year anniversary celebration. Dee was there, of course, sitting in the front row with a proud smile on her face. Margot was beside her, no longer a resident, but now an employee, using her forensic accounting skills to help other women uncover financial abuse. Pastor Linda was serving coffee and cookies in the back, telling terrible jokes to anyone who would listen. Michael Holloway had come, and beside him, to Claire's surprise, Catherine Mitchell. Marcus's mother had become an unexpected ally, donating money and time to Haven House as a form of penance for the years she had looked the other way. Even Victoria Shaw was there, officially retired but still showing up to offer advice and occasional representation to the women who needed it most. And in the very front row, wearing a purple dress she had picked out herself, sat Emma. Claire cleared her throat. 1 year ago, she began, I was thrown out of my home with nothing. My husband had taken everything. My money, my reputation, my daughter. I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She paused, looking at the faces in the audience. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. But I was wrong. Because when I walked through the doors of Haven House, I found something I never expected. I found a community, a family, a sisterhood. Her voice strengthened. I found women who had been through their own battles. Women who understood what it meant to be broken. Women who knew that the breaking was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Claire smiled at Emma, who grinned back. My mother used to say something that I never really understood until now. She used to say, keep your own bank account, even if it only has $500. A woman without her own money is a woman without choices. She looked at the cross-stitch sampler that had been framed and hung on the wall behind her. Linda's terrible, perfect creation. She was right. But I have learned something else too. Something even more important. Claire's eyes moved across the room, touching on each face that had helped her survive. A woman without her sisterhood is a woman without hope. And hope, my friends, is what this place is built on. She raised her glass. To Haven House. To the women who built it. To the women who live here. And to everyone who believes that broken women can become unbreakable. The room erupted in applause. Later, as the celebration wound down and people began to leave, Emma tugged at Claire's hand. Mommy? Yes, baby. You know how you said you would always come back for me? Claire knelt down so she was eye to eye with her daughter. I remember. Emma's face was serious, thoughtful. Will you always be strong like you were? Even when things are hard? Claire considered the question carefully. She had learned, over the past year, that honest answers were better than easy ones. I will try, she said. But being strong does not mean never being scared. It means being scared and doing the hard thing anyway. And if I ever need help being strong, I know I have people who will help me. Just like I helped you, Emma nodded slowly. Like the sisterhood. Exactly like the sisterhood. Emma threw her arms around Claire's neck. I want to be part of the sisterhood when I grow up. Claire held her daughter tight. You already are, baby. You already are. They walked out of Haven House together, into the evening light, into a future that was uncertain but full of possibility. Behind them, the building stood solid and strong, a beacon for women who had nowhere else to go. Inside, Dee was already welcoming a new arrival, a young woman with a black eye and a baby on her hip, leading her to a room where she could sleep safely for the first time in months. The cycle continued. The sisterhood grew, and somewhere out there, more women were finding their strength, finding their voice, finding each other. The story did not end. It never ends. It just keeps going, passed from one woman to another, a chain of survival and strength that stretches back through generations and forward into a future that gets a little brighter every time someone refuses to give up. Claire Mitchell did not give up. And because she did not give up, neither would the women who came after her. That was the real ending. Not revenge, not triumph, legacy. A legacy of strength, a legacy of sisterhood, a legacy of hope. And somewhere in the evening light, walking home with her daughter, Claire Mitchell smiled. She had survived. And now she was going to make sure others could too. Now, if this story speaks to something inside you, if it reminds you of your own battles or gives you hope for someone you love, I have a small favor to ask. Hit that like button. Not for me, for the algorithm, so this story can reach another woman who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me what you survived. Or simply type the word strong so I know you are part of this sisterhood. And if you are not subscribed yet, join this community. Because we tell stories here that do more than entertain. We tell stories that heal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Now, let us begin.